Graduation is around the corner, but there's something in your way. You need to study, but it'll take more than just Starbucks coffee. You need my AP Euro exam highlight reel. The Black Death was an epidemic that devastated Europe from 1346 to 1353. Initially breaking out in China, the bubonic plague was then transmitted to Europe through trade and fleas from infested rats on ships. The results were catastrophic, killing 60% of Europe's population, leading to severe labor shortages. Workers' demands for higher wages were never achieved, leading to several peasant revolts across Europe by the end of the 1300s. Many saw the Black Death as God's punishment for mankind's sins. The disease spread and killed people rapidly. Symptoms included enlarged painful lymph nodes, chills, fever, weakness, nausea, and ultimately death. These were a series of holy wars that started in the late 11th century. The wars were organized by Western European Christians in response to Muslim wars and expansion. Christian fighters were promised indulgence as they fought to check the spread of Islam, retake control of the Holy Land, recapture formerly Christian territories, and conquer pagan areas. The Crusades declined during the 16th century due to the effects of the Protestant Reformation. Dante's Divine Comedy is an esteemed epic from the 14th century. The work is divided into 3 sections representing hell, purgatory, and heaven. Dante, the main character, is guided by Virgil, an ancient Roman who cannot enter heaven because he was a pagan. Dante's Inferno is different because it is cold and icy. Lucifer is trapped in ice at the base of hell. Dante's poem is a bridge to the Renaissance because it puts people on the same plane as God, represents a typical idea in a revolutionary way, and is a return to antiquity. Humanism is the praise and glorification of human beings and appreciation of liberal arts and education which they believed set men free. Humanism starts in the Middle Ages and is the bridge to the Renaissance. Humanists believe in the greatness of mankind instead of God and emphasize individuality so we can improve ourselves and then society. Francesco Petrarch is considered the father of humanism. Influenced by Cicero and Augustine, he is famous for his sonnets about his love Laura, and for rediscovering Latin and Greek texts from the classical era. Antiquity is important to humanism because it was a time before God and religious influence. His writing also helped shape modern Italian language. Da Vinci and Michelangelo were 2 famous Renaissance artists. Da Vinci was known as a Renaissance man because he had many talents. He believed people have to really see art without bias or opinion. He was easily distracted, so he often didn't finish his paintings. Famous for performing autopsies, he painted the human body in great detail. His famous works include the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. The Last Supper, which is the night before Jesus' crucifixion, is extraordinary for 2 major reasons. 1. Da Vinci captures the chaos of the exact moment Jesus admits he knows his betrayer, which is the technique of nominalism. And number 2, Da Vinci makes Jesus the focal point using math. Michelangelo, on the other hand, was the rock star of the Renaissance. Because he was the most popular artist in his time, he was involved in a scandal and was very wealthy and friendly with important people. His self-doubt made him very human, and he painted himself dark and depressed in self-portraits. He loved sculpting more than anything. His famous works included The Last Judgment, in which he painted the nagging cardinal as the man above the door, the Pieta, proportioning Mary to Jesus by making her dress voluminous and making her look young to evoke pity, the Sistine Chapel with the famous tile of the creation of Adam, and the David, in which he depicted David before the fight, making David a relatable character. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, his handbook for political leaders, during his exile, intending it to be a resume for a job in the Florentine government. He was exiled because his name was on a list of people who were plotting against the Medici family. Machiavelli's political theories are not influenced by morality. He believed the secret to success was secrets of one's enemies. His principles include the balance of the lion and the fox, being very adaptable, exhibiting fear rather than love, and always thinking 5 steps ahead. The Medici family is a powerful Italian bourgeoisie family that ruled Florence and later Tuscany. The family became very wealthy through commerce and banking. It produced 4 popes and married into royal families, such as the French Queen Catherine de' Medici. The Medicis essentially funded Renaissance art, helping transform Florence into the center of the Renaissance. Erasmus is the man who laid the egg that Luther hatched, meaning his thoughts regarding Christianity laid the foundation for Luther, who ultimately fulfilled his ideas. Erasmus's ideology included the philosophy of Christ, simplistic practice of Christ, and inner piety. He wanted the morality of Christians to surpass church life, the emphasis of Christianity's goal, and the end of the veneration of saints, relics, and pilgrimages. Erasmus mocked the monks in his book The Praise of Folly of 1511. Pluralism was key in the corruption of the Roman Catholic Church. It refers to how clergymen would have more than one job and thus would receive more money. However, these men were lazy and often hired other unskilled workers to do the job. This led to poor work or failure of duties. Martin Luther was originally an attorney who later became an influential monk. As a devout monk, he felt no matter how much he worshipped or confessed, he never felt saved. He realized most deeds for salvation were done out of self-interest and that only faith and justification by grace alone led to salvation. Luther posted his 95 Theses on the door of the Roman Catholic Church on the eve of All Saints' Day, October 31st. The day was a religious holiday, so he knew everyone would see it. This was revolutionary because no one had criticized the Pope's authority before. In his paper, Martin Luther criticized the practice of selling indulgences inspired by Jubilee indulgences. He wrote his paper in Latin to target church hierarchy. Pope Leo X calls Luther a drunk German monk in response. St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre is part of the wars of religion that ignited across Europe. This particular incident was a targeted killing of Huguenots in France in 1572. Queen Catherine de' Medici influenced her son King Charles IX to order the assassination of Huguenot Protestant leaders in Paris, who were all in town for Henry of Navarre's wedding. The killing spiraled out of control as a general massacre of Huguenots began. As many as 70,000 people were killed in France. This led to the Edict of Nantes, which allowed for religious freedom in France but stipulated France was a Catholic country. King Henry VIII's great matter was the lack of a male heir with his wife Catherine of Aragon. This matter dominated 6 years of his life. The king turned to the Bible, which he interpreted as marrying his brother's widow, Catherine, is the reason she cannot produce a viable heir. At the same time, the king's mistress, Anne Boleyn, who told him she was pregnant with a boy, presented him with the opportunity to marry someone else for an heir. King Henry VIII tried to divorce Catherine, both she and the Pope stood in his way. With the help of Thomas More as his new chancellor, King Henry declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England, which overrode papal authority and authorized his divorce. Queen Elizabeth I is the daughter of King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. She had difficulty ascending the throne because she is seen as an illegitimate heir and is Anglican. The English Reformation doesn't truly start until her reign. When she discovered Mary, Queen of Scotland, took her spot, Elizabeth I ordered her beheading. When the Spanish Armada attacked England, Elizabeth made a famous speech. Dressed in armor alongside her men, she said, "We'll meet in heaven or on the battle of victory." Her biggest problem was refusal to get married. Besides for its worry about the lack of an heir, Parliament had a good relationship with the Queen, known as balanced polity. As Voltaire described, the age of absolutism was the age of Louis XIV, the French king. His title was the Sun King because everything revolved around him. Plus, he had total control of France. He is responsible for the Palace of Versailles, which he built to show up to the world and as a convenience to rule over the nobles and have his home, the court, and government in one location. His treatment of the nobles is brilliant because he gives them demeaning tasks, such as changing his shirt and picking out the chairs. Nobles felt important when in reality they were excluded from politics. His religious impact was his mandate that France was a Catholic nation. He passed the Edict of Fontainebleau to essentially destroy the Edict of Nantes in religious freedom. Through his many wars, Louis bankrupted France. He led France into the War of Devolution, the Dutch War, the War of the League of Augsburg, and the War of Spanish Succession. Under Louis, France ended up having the largest standing army of 100,000 men in the world at the time. With fashion, he left a powerful legacy because he set the tone for the fashion industry, not in just France but all over the world, with the help of his financial advisor, Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Louis made fashion seasonal and a part of national identity. He brought the industries of jewel, textiles, architecture, and more to France. This traditional system versus an industrialized one benefited French economics. Louis was also a genius because he used sex appeal for advertising. Most importantly, Louis initiated the trend of high heels. Thanks to Louis, France became the fashion capital. The Russian Tsar Peter the Great was a son of Ivan the Terrible. One of his greatest achievements was building Russia's navy. In fact, as a kid, Peter played war games with friends. Peter is the first Tsar to leave Russia. His trip to Europe made him realize Russia never experienced the Renaissance or the scientific age, which prompted him to begin Russia's westernization. He was very impressed with Versailles and built St. Petersburg, originally called Peterhof, though he never saw its completion. This was his window to the west, meaning he could keep an eye on Western Europe while it could see Russia's greatness too. Peter fought Swedish King Charles II to get his land, and started building the city before he even won. He forced Swedish prisoners of war to build the city because many of his men died from malaria. Peter cut his trip to Europe short to deal with the Streltsky Rebellion, led by people in the Streltsky military at home. He beheaded and tortured members, showing people not to mess with the Tsar.
The Age of Enlightenment would challenge this idea. 13 years after Louis XIV died, and during the reign of Louis XV, a traveler returned to his home here at Le Bret, near Bordeaux, France. Baron de Montesquieu, a French nobleman and judge, had visited many parts of the world, and now, in 1728, he had begun to set down his thoughts. On and off for nearly 20 years, he wrote what would become his greatest work, in which he opposed the divine rights of kings with the natural rights of the common man.
Charles de Montesquieu's ideas about government resembled those of a balanced democrat. As a Frenchman under King Louis XIV, he despised absolutism. He believed the best government was a checks and balance system, inspired by the English parliamentary system, because it avoided a dominant branch of government. He believed man and nature were fearful and avoid war. The need for food forces people to come together. Thomas Hobbes, however, favored absolutism because he saw kings as most practical and consistent. He experienced the English Civil War and King Charles I's beheading. Hobbes was literally born in fear because his mom went into early labor during the Spanish Armada. He saw man and nature as brutish, violent, lonely, and always equal in fear and danger of death. He believed the social contract was only between the people and not the king, that religion is the source of civil war. Paris was the cultural capital. The word philosophe is a French word, showing that France was truly the center of intelligence. Across Paris, philosophes and ordinary people met in meeting places called salons to discuss social issues, thus facilitating the spread of Enlightenment ideas. Originally, the meetings were at coffee houses, but they were too public. People had to be invited to salons, and they were of various occupations and class status, which was crucial in providing an array of perspectives for each topic. Women played leading roles because they hosted the salons. They decided the guest list in every detail. Average women got only a third-grade education, so witnessing these discussions and being involved was revolutionary. Marie-Therese Jeffin was a popular female host. Salons died during the French Revolution because women were at its forefront. Pierre Bayle's contribution to the Enlightenment was applying skepticism, which was challenging a statement's validity. Although he was a Protestant, he applied skepticism mostly to religion. He was against superstition, religious intolerance, and dogmatism. His critique was revolutionary because he challenged social norms. Bayle applied textual criticism from science to characters in the Bible. He analyzed King David and said he was an evil man. Bayle is best known for his historical and critical dictionary. This literary work was considered the Bible of the Enlightenment. James Cook discovered the Pacific island of Tahiti, of New Zealand, and Australia. He wrote his book Travels as an account of his journey and the different primitive people of Tahiti. This opened up to the idea of a noble savage, which was an individual who was very happy with just living his different, simple life. His experience and book led to the realization that other developed societies with different customs exist outside of Europe. Europeans were originally ethnocentric, believing that European culture was superior while judging and pitying other civilizations. Soon, cultural relativism surfaced, meaning people stopped judging but rather began understanding other cultures. Isaac Newton was key in inspiring the Age of Enlightenment. His concept about the laws of gravity made people believe that by following reason, people could discover the natural laws that govern aspects of society, including politics and economics. Newton came up with the laws of gravity and of motion and proved the planets revolve around the sun. His ideas went against traditional religious beliefs of the time. Besides science, he also contributed greatly to mathematics, theology, and philosophy. He kind of went crazy during the later half of his life because he believed God was communicating with him through the numbers written in chapter Bibles. Another interesting fact is that Newton was involved in alchemy. Adam Smith was a Scottish economist and philosopher. He is known for writing The Wealth of Nations and the Theory of Moral Sentiments. He opposed mercantilism along with its use of protective tariffs and the idea that a nation's wealth is based on gold and silver. Instead, he believed a country's wealth is based on labor. He argued government should not interfere with the free market and only lend an invisible hand, and he believed people acting in self-interest actually benefit society. His ideas led to the foundation of economic liberalism and capitalism. The French Revolution featured many pivotal events. The sans-culottes, which were the radicals, invaded the jails and slaughtered everyone because they wanted to make sure that the counter-revolutionaries would not join the invading army. They did this because they heard Austria and Prussia were going to invade France. They murdered, raped, and disemboweled priests and hackled nobles apart. This was known as the September Massacre. Vendée was one of the 3 French suburban areas where people did not fully support the revolution. They felt a disconnect between them and Parisians. The people of Vendée rebelled against a new military draft, and revolutionaries slaughtered them with the guillotine because it was efficient and humane. Also known as the Reign of Terror, the radicals say the French Revolution lasted for 10 to 11 months. Because people were killed in masses in different areas, it was hard to keep accurate records of deaths, so either 16,000 or 50,000 people were killed. Radicals hated the king and queen and wanted to create a republic in France without the monarchy. This resentment came from how the people were starving and didn't have bread while the king was living extravagantly. The three main figures were Robespierre, Marat, and Danton. The Republic of Virtue reset society in France. It dismantled religion through de-Christianization by focusing on reason and rationality. Robespierre was in charge of the Committee of Public Safety. He was called the Incorruptible because he believed the Reign of Terror was rooted in virtue. However, his view against the death penalty changed, and he was a leading proponent of killing the king using the guillotine. He was pro-freedom of speech but curbed newspapers' freedom of press. He went too far with the Reign of Terror. When he drew up a list of counter-revolutionaries that included convention members, his own allies guillotined him. With his death came the end of the revolution. Danton was able to articulate Robespierre's ideas to the public because of his image as an everyday man. He was crucial in motivating people to carry out the revolution because he galvanized them to join the military. Marat was a very successful revolutionary. He started a newspaper called The Friend of the People, which was the propaganda machine of Robespierre. He lived in a bathtub most of his life because he had a gross skin disease that he got from hiding in the sewer from the police. Marat was assassinated by Charlotte Corday. She stabbed him in the bathtub and said, "I killed him so France could be saved." She killed him instead of Robespierre because he was the propaganda. Napoleon and his followers overthrew the French Directory in 1799. They simply stated, "We're going to install Napoleon as the new leader," and everyone just said okay. Napoleon told the world a crazy action-filled story just to build his public perception. With the coup d'etat, Napoleon installed himself as the first consul, or head executive of France. By 1804, Napoleon declared himself emperor and reinstated Catholicism. At his coronation, he forces the Pope to sign the Concordat of 1801, in which the Pope acknowledges the victories of the French Revolution. Napoleon's mother didn't attend the coronation, but in the painting of it, she's painted in the center. The Continental System was a blockade that Napoleon designed to hurt Great Britain's commerce during the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon could not do a land invasion because Great Britain was too strong. He told Tsar Alexander I that if Russia traded with Great Britain, he would invade Russia. He also commanded the Americas not to trade with Great Britain. Enforcing this system proved difficult for France. Napoleon found out that Russia was still trading with Great Britain and sent in 6,000 men. He moved his men in waves so that they would not be attacked all at once and told them to live off the land. However, the Russians burned everything down, known as a scorched earth policy. The Russians also lured in French men and then doubled behind them and cut off Napoleon's food supply. This was a devastating French defeat. Napoleon was forced to retreat after the Russian invasion, humiliating him as a deserter. He is exiled to Elba, but the soldiers still love him and help him sneak off the island. In his return, he encounters other soldiers, but no one shoots him, and he is welcomed back into France. He rules for 100 days, but King Louis VIII, Great Britain, Austria, and Prussia were not happy. At the Battle of Waterloo against these forces, Napoleon doesn't think Prussia would make it to battle, but Prussia showed up with reinforcements, leading to a French defeat. Napoleon's punishment is exile to St. Helena instead of death because people knew exile was worse for him. Possible causes of death are cancer, poison, arsenic poisoning from wallpaper. Congress of Vienna was created to deal with France post-Napoleon and maintain a balance of power across Europe. The key players were from Great Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia. With France, they re-established the Bourbon dynasty under Louis XVIII and enlarged kingdoms around France. They also pushed France's borders back to 1790 and forced France to pay an indemnity and accept an army of occupation for 5 years. Prince Clemens von Metternich from Austria was the Congress leader. He was guided by principle of legitimacy in which he restored legitimate monarchs to preserve tradition. After Napoleon, conservatism emerged. It favored obedience to political authority, thought religion was necessary for social order, valued the community over the individual, and was against civil liberties. The Concert of Europe was created to carry out the Congress of Vienna's goals against war and revolution. The Quadruple Alliance of Great Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia wanted to renew commitment against Napoleon restoration and agreed to meet periodically to maintain peace in Europe. The Quadruple Alliance included France to form the Quintuple Alliance. The Troppau Protocol arose when the powers had to deal with the Spanish and Italian rebellions. Metternich proposed a policy of intervention which read that the powers of Europe had the right to send armies to quell revolts and restore legitimate monarchs. Great Britain refused to interfere in other internal affairs, but Austria, Prussia, and Russia upheld this right as long as it was in their favor. Liberalism is the belief that all people should be as free from restraint as possible. Economic liberalism is a laissez-faire mentality where government should not interrupt the free market. Government should only function for defense, police protection, and public works. Thomas Malthus used the natural cycle of population and food supply, while David Ricardo used the iron law of wages to demonstrate this point. Political liberalism supported equality for the law, civil liberties including freedom of assembly, speech and press, freedom from arbitrary arrest, religious freedom, separation of church and state, peaceful opposition to government and representative assembly elected by voters, and ministerial responsibility. The Greeks revolted against the Ottoman Empire. The powers decided to help the Greeks defeat the Turks, so British and French fleets defeated an Ottoman armada in 1827. Russia declared war on the Ottomans in 1828 and invaded their European provinces. The Ottomans allowed France, Russia, and Britain to decide Greece's fate. In 1830, Greece was proclaimed an independent kingdom with its own royal dynasty. The dual monarchy was an 1867 compromise between the Germans of Austria and the Magyars of Hungary to resolve the nationalities problem by creating the Empire of Austria and the Kingdom of Hungary, with a common ministry for finance, foreign affairs, and war. The Augsburg of 1867 negotiated this after the Austro-Prussian War. Each part of the empire had a constitution, bicameral legislature, governmental machinery for domestic affairs, and its own capital. Both were ruled by Francis Joseph, the emperor. Impressionism rejected the salon idea of perfection in art. They saw originality focused on bright colors, dynamic brushstrokes, and different ways light hits objects in nature. Impressionist art reflected pastimes of upper middle class. Monet was a famous impressionist. His famous painting is Impressionism Sunrise, which gave impressionists their names. Albert Einstein created a theory of relativity that stated that time and space are not absolute but relative to the observer and are interwoven in a four-dimensional space-time continuum. If all material things were to disappear from the universe, time and space would also disappear because they are dependent. He said matter was just a form of energy, which helped explain the energies in an atom. He said if we can move at the speed of light, we can time travel. His theories led to the atomic age. Curie was a scientist whose discovery that radium gives off radiation from within the atom led to the study of subatomic particles. Understanding the process within atoms became the main focus of new physics. She paved the way for X-rays, but this exposure eventually killed her. Extreme nationalists argue that nations were in a struggle for existence, in which only the fittest survived. Von Bernhardi wrote that war is the father of all things, and is necessary for nations to advance. He said nations had to fight so the strongest nation would rise above all others. Folk means community, along with the idea that Germans were the only pure successors of the Aryans. Aryans were expected to save civilization from Jews, Negroes, and Orientals. Sorel came up with revolutionary socialism, which called for violence as a way to achieve socialism. He advocated general strike where workers take violence, heroic action against capitalist order. He wanted an oligarchy to rule instead of one person. Bergson said that rational and scientific thought was practical, but could not explain reality. He said reality was a life force that covered all things, but cannot be divided. Once you describe an experience, it just becomes a story. The major causes of World War I spell out Maine: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism is a glorification of armed strength. Countries are trying to outperform the other and show off their military capabilities. Germany built a navy, which Great Britain didn't like, so the British built their first battleship, the Dreadnought. Russia lied about its industrialization. Alliances dragged everyone into war because they were secretive. The Congress of Vienna tried to prevent this. Imperialism is European countries competing against each other for land in Africa and Asia. This created hostility amongst nations. Nationalism was a form of terrorism in 1918, and the initial spark that set off the world. The regions in the Balkans all wanted independence, which some achieved while others didn't. Serbia wanted the rest of the Balkans to also have independence, and harbored terrorists called Black Hand Movement. Gavrilo Princip assassinated Archduke Ferdinand. Significant battles of World War I include the Battles of the Frontiers in 1914, the Battle of Verdun in 1916, which was the longest and considered most brutal battle of the war. General Pétain was in command and led the French to victory. The Battle of the Marne in 1914 was a strategic victory for the Allies. The Battle of Somme in 1916 was a German victory and had the first use of tanks in combat. The Meuse-Argonne offensive of August 1918 was an Allied offensive with the aim of pushing the German army further east to cut them off from their supplies. All three German defensive lines were breached and the Germans had to surrender. Before World War I, Europe saw itself as a collective culture. After, Europeans saw themselves as different. There were even nationalistic movements in colonies such as India. War is no longer romanticized, and people have a more cynical view of the world, creating the lost generation. The Allies created War Clause 231, in which Germany would accept full blame for the war. This led to World War II, partly because Germany became resentful and started building up the military despite the treaty. America transforms into a true superpower. Compared to other nations, America came out of World War I fine. The Treaty of Versailles ended World War I and was signed on June 28, 1919. It revealed the split between France, who wanted to dismember Germany, and Britain and America, who wanted to not start another war. The treaty created the new League of Nations, which American President Wilson wanted. It specified Germany's new boundaries and gave land back to Belgium, France, Poland, Lithuania, and Denmark. It ordered the demilitarization of Germany, took away German colonies, set limits of 100,000 men for German armed forces, and prohibited Germany from possessing certain weapons. It also included the War Guilt Clause. Germany was forced to pay reparations to the Allies, among other financial obligations. In November 2014, the then president of Ukraine was faced with financial troubles and had a choice between help from either the EU or Putin. His decision to accept a $15 billion loan from Putin led to Ukrainian national and often violent protests, because many Ukrainians wanted to become closer affiliated with Western Europe and break away from Russia's influence. In the meantime, Putin has been supporting pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine. In March 2014, Putin annexed Crimea. In response to Russia's aggression, the EU imposed economic sanctions on Russia, leading to economic troubles. As fighting ensued, the Minsk agreements were drawn up. The first was signed in September 2015 and failed after 5 days. The second one was signed in February 2015 to establish a new ceasefire and plan to end the conflict, which has not been fully implemented yet.
On November 13th, gunmen and bombers attacked a number of locations throughout Paris. They killed over 120 people and wounded an even larger number.
Ce qui s'est produit hier à Paris, c'est un acte de guerre.
ISIS, otherwise known as the Islamic State, claimed responsibility for these attacks.
A group of believers from the soldiers of the Caliphate set out targeting the capital of prostitution and vice, the lead carrier of the cross in Europe, Paris.
In the past, ISIS really hasn't launched any major terrorist attacks abroad. ISIS's basic goal is holding on to its territory in Iraq and Syria. Why change your strategy now? One theory, according to the Brookings Institution's Will McCants, is that they're trying to warn off their enemies abroad.
They want to deter further military action.
Recently, ISIS has been losing territory. Bombing from a US-led coalition, which includes France, has hurt the group.
They have lost something like 25% of their territory.
So ISIS has a problem. It has strong foreign militaries that are fighting against it, and it doesn't have a good way to fight back at them. So one theory, according to McCants, is that the attack in Paris is a means of showing these enemies that ISIS will hurt them if they keep attacking it. Evidence for this theory includes the fact that ISIS recently attacked a part of Lebanon that's a Hezbollah stronghold. Hezbollah is a Lebanese militia that is fighting on the same side as Bashar al-Assad in Syria, nominally an ISIS enemy. Similarly, there's strong suspicion that ISIS bombed a Russian civilian airliner in Egypt. So the idea here is that ISIS wants to show potential enemies that you will pay a price if you attack ISIS in Syria and Iraq. So if ISIS attacked Paris, it might not have been out of strength. It might have been out of weakness.